Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast. We're so glad you could join us. I am Laura Horton, Director of Marketing at Salesforce, and I am excited to be joined today by Tiffani Bova. Tiffani is our Global Customer Growth and Innovation Specialist. She comes to us with a wealth of sales experience, and she's going to be talking to us a little bit today about the sales perspective on marketing and how we can best work together to be aligned and sell more for everyone. So Tiffani, thank you for joining us, and I will let you kick it off.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everybody for attending this webinar. I think it's going to be a fun morning. The topic is Dear B2B Marketer, a love letter from your sales team. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we dig in, just a reminder that we may make some forward-looking statements today. Please make any investment or purchasing decisions based on what is generally available in the product and not what I discuss in this presentation this morning. Before we get started, I think there's something I'd like to sort of set as a bit of context. I've spent the past 20 years either selling myself individually, carrying a bag, managing sales teams, managing sales and marketing, or more recently, advising companies for 10 years while at Gartner on how to improve sales effectiveness and performance, both via sort of direct sales and indirect sales. But, in full disclosure, I like to call myself a recovering seller and have a slight bit of a slant more towards the seller side. It might be a little obvious in some of the comments that I make. And while I have managed both sales and marketing, I've never just managed marketing exclusively. So the topic of sort of why sales and marketing alignment is more important now than ever is actually something that I've experienced in my own career, and hopefully the conversation we have this morning will be enlightening and maybe create some new thinking for those of you that are joining us live and those of you that are going to listen later on the replay. When you think about why sales and marketing is more important now than ever, I think that it's really easy to get lost in the simplistics of things. But today's marketing landscape is getting much more unpredictable. There are a few reasons for this. Today's buyers are more empowered, as everybody knows, and are driving their own buying cycles. They're educated and know what they want. They're doing more and more research on their social media channels and mobile devices, and nowadays there are an average of 5 stakeholders involved in every B2B purchasing decision, according to some recent research by CEB. So, if I was in a room and I could see you guys, I'd ask how many of you start your own personal research by pulling up a search engine in your B2C relationships with brands. I'm sure everybody would say yes. I mean, the first thing you do is go and start searching online. So I'm guessing almost everyone would say yes. What's happening is that we as consumers in our personal lives are taking those habits into our B2B work life and are unable to have that similar experience we have that might be seamless and frictionless and mobile and easy. And that is where, as buyers, we're forging our own path to do not always what we do in our personal life and our business life. And this is where it may not always generate in the B2B world a positive brand experience. So because of this, right, the buyer's driving more and more in the buying cycle, and in an ideal world, you would want something that feels more connected as you take your personal path, which means sales and marketing must become more aligned to bring a better customer experience to market. For the sales and marketing teams today, no matter, you have to figure out how to work hand in hand to reach prospects earlier in their buying cycle and their buying journey, no matter where they're engaging, and make the most out of every interaction you have with your buyers. And this slide right here just sort of, what I wanted to highlight is while it may seem and feel very linear, customers may be going back and forth throughout this process, and it may be a combination of online, mobile, brick and mortar for those of you who have retail, or face-to-face selling or call center selling. So it gets much more complicated as the buyer starts to move further down their own journey. And because of that, right, sales and marketing has got to align themselves. But what we're seeing is most companies are struggling to adapt to this change. The first thing I'd say, as I was just mentioning, is it's becoming more and more obvious, this disconnect at the team level. It may be connected at the executive level, but marketing and sales at the field level. So I'm a marketing manager, a product manager. I'm somebody who's running campaigns, and then the sales rep themselves, and a lack of understanding on what the other side does. I think one of the things, having run both sides of the business, is I think there's this great misunderstanding of what marketing does on a day-to-day basis, and then more importantly, I also think that there's a misunderstanding on what sales does every day, between the two teams. When you look at if you've got teams disconnected, one of the things that really drives teams being disconnected is the metrics. If marketing is being measured on KPIs, right, key performance indicators, which may be isolating them from sales or vice versa, then you have to really work hard to align those KPIs to be more inclusive versus separating. It's interesting, as I have talked to hundreds of sales leaders and hundreds of marketing leaders over the last 15 years, 20 years, I would say that this is something that is really coming to the forefront, where people are measuring and monitoring their teams using very similar metrics that they always have. And one thing that's, unfortunately really clear is sales' first measure of success is quota. Marketing's first measure of success usually now is becoming more about customer satisfaction. And so already right out of the gate, you have this, trouble with the metrics not being aligned. The next is disconnected experiences. And what this is about is, thinking about marketing being focused on the buyer journey. And I'm going to be really clear here, right? The buyer journey is the path in which the buyer is on, and however they choose to do that, where sales tends to be much more inwardly focused on the sales process. So what do I need to do now? What do I need to do next? What are the things that we should be doing going forward? And so if you think about those three, right, if you've got disconnected teams, disconnected metrics, and disconnected experiences, it's really difficult to say that even with all the investments you're making within the two teams, that you're getting everything you can out of the systems and tools and trainings that you're bringing to market. When you think about the goal moving towards alignment and why it's important, right, one customer said this to one of my colleagues the other day. Sales and marketing colleagues attend industry events together. It means they have a common experience to build on, right? What are the things you can do in order to push that? Because if you look at the top demand generation priorities, the first one is focusing on lead quality over lead quantity, and I think that's one that everybody knows very well. The next one is improving campaign results, right? And that goes back to lead quality again. But the next one is this improving sales and marketing alignment. And I'd say it's been a conversation for so long, we have to think about why does this continue to happen? I think it's because of those three previous reasons. The teams are disconnected, the wrong metrics, and the experience inward focused versus outwardly focused. But also it's capturing the information that both teams need accurately in a system, right? Whether it's a CRM system, whether if you're a smaller organization and you may be using other tools, whatever it is, making sure you're capturing that information so that each team has the ability to build on this common experience that we're talking about. And when you start looking at metrics getting even closer, this is interesting. You can see on the left, this top three sales success metrics that we got out of primary research we did, and then as well on the right side, this top three marketing success metrics. And you can see that customer satisfaction, as I mentioned earlier, is top of marketing, and amount of new revenue is top for sales. And then you get into new customers and then revenue growth and customer acquisition. So they loosely align. Terminology, we could be questioning, what in fact that means. But, one thing I want to call out is that according to some recent research by CSO, 94% of world-class performers align sales and marketing along the customer journey, but only 39% of all the respondents from their sales best practices survey said that they did it all at the same time, right? And so aligning along this journey means that you have to think of things like account-based marketing as a great example. It's become a great way for marketing to get far more engaged in driving demand with highly targeted efforts, which are then passed as kind of sales actions leads, if you will, to the sales team to pursue. But because sales and marketing are both involved in these leads or deals or prospects, it's important to highlight that while marketing does its job in targeting, engaging, and converting the right accounts, the tenets of account-based marketing that make it so different and effective is it also gives buyers more control and insight into the purchase process. And so the challenge here is if marketing and sales messages aren't in sync as they're going for new revenues, the success metric, or if they're going for customer acquisition and growth, the customer will be far more aware of these disconnects versus a generically targeted account. So if you're getting better about marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, account-based marketing, the result of that is the client, the prospect, the lead is far more transparent to them where, in fact, marketing may be saying one thing, sales is saying something else. Sales does something that marketing doesn't do, and or vice versa. And so those handoffs and touches can have huge impact into the way in which the customer perceives the brand. When you think about this unified and relevant experience, this really stood out to me. There was a recent study done by the Economic Intelligence Unit from The Economist, and 86% of CMOs and senior marketing execs believe they will own the end-to-end customer experience by 2020. And while that sounds interesting, right, I'm a little concerned about own anything, because I think at the end of the day, the customer owns their journey, right? It's the brand's responsibility to make sure that they're engaging and creating great experiences. But if you look on the right side of this, this question was, what are the top 3 channels through which you expect your customer to experience your organization's marketing efforts in 2020? Shockingly to me, sales isn't even mentioned as one of the choices. Now, it could just be the fact that it was an assumption assumed that it was in many of those other categories. But that worries me if marketing feels like they own end-to-end, yet they don't see sales as one of the top sort of customer channels in which they're going to experience marketing efforts. So, there's lots of things as marketing is taking more and more digital and sales is getting more engaged on social, that disconnect will start to show itself, and the sum of all the experiences that a customer has is their journey with you. And that's how you can create this competitive differentiation. As you start to align sales and marketing, the customer experience becomes exponentially better. So now, how do you translate these buying trends into actionable playbooks? And this is a fun topic for me, right? Because the moment you get greater alignment with account-based marketing or marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, outbound efforts, driving demand and getting inbound calls, the trick here is what do you do to make the experience at that point not only effective for the business, for your brand, right, in selling, but also for the customer themselves. And so because of that, the B2B marketing playbook is being rewritten. And what do I mean by playbook? So if you think about how we used to go to market, it was all very linear. Marketers had a marketing plan with different tactics they'd use to push their message to buyers. The downfall of this traditional mass marketing system today is that it doesn't really understand each and every individual buyer. And while you can't get to the personalization level individually buyer by buyer unless you have a very small subset of customers, the burden fell to the buyer to reach out to sales rep as soon as they were ready to make a purchase. Well, today that's just not the case. The selling process is shifting so dramatically that when you think about a customer showing up, they want a much different experience with you. What happens when they're not getting it, right? A lead shows up, you've worked really hard to get it either inbound or account-based marketing, or you've got something generated that's interesting. I'm sure this is what sounds familiar, right? Marketing says, we're killing it on leads. Sales says, I get nothing from marketing. And I know that this is a stark reality. If you asked a subset of sales reps, how important the marketing materials are that they're giving, you may hear it doesn't add a whole lot of value. And if you talk to marketing and said, hey, what's going on with the sales reps, they'd be like, they don't follow up on leads, or there's not enough leads, or the quality of the leads are bad. And marketing saying there's just a low conversion rate. And so you've got this issue where not only on the team's disconnected, but there's this lack of trust between leads being delivered overall in the market, and then coming back in the other way. And so if you want to think about why this is important, it's because the reality is that if you don't get sales and marketing more closely aligned, this will continue to happen, and all the investments you make on systems, tools, and training are going to make no difference. So understanding the customer journey, I think, is super important. I love this cartoon. I've tweeted it a number of times, but when you don't understand the customer journey, the customer knows it. If you don't earn their trust, make them feel you understand their needs, then the experience with your brand can be significantly impacted. This cartoon shows, right, how the company identified where the customer was in their internal map, right, their internal customer map, and answered and then just started speaking as if I knew where you are, and I'm going to tell you what I think you want to know, and I think you're here, right? And she was quick to point out, number one, when in her answer, it's you don't know me, you don't know what I'm looking for, and what I really need from you is not that, right? I'm really just looking for the restroom. So ultimately, the mistake you make is I think I know where they are because they, are walking by with a cart and she got a phone in her hand and I know she's looking for this. Making that assumption can really set you up for then turning off the customer to thinking that you just don't know who they are. And so in order to make that better, you need to start getting much more sophisticated about taking approaches that are personalized, understanding them. Now, personalized email could be part of account-based marketing, right? When you target a set of accounts with a particular message, with a particular product solution, with a particular value set, and more importantly, with a specific set of sales resources and maybe support resources, engineers, pre-sales engineers, et cetera. And when you get that personalized, you can see different flavors of it, right? It's personalized with a subscriber field. It's personalized with their first name and last name, maybe just their first name. You're starting to leverage predictive intelligence, creating personalized emails, and then it's triggering personalized emails in real time based on things that they did. And this automation and intelligence and analytics behind the scenes, especially now with social selling, picking up more and more attention. Personalizing email will even further details will stand out between someone who gets a generic touch or something that is more specifically directed to them. And to scale this, it will always be a combination of people, process, and tools. One without the other will impact results. So it isn't just email being personalized. It isn't then just a follow-up call. It isn't just the right message, the right product positioning, the right pricing. It's a combination of all of those things. So solving personalized email, having account-based marketing, doing marketing qualified leads in isolation, it doesn't deliver as effective results as it could if you start to look at it much more holistically, going back to the teams getting much more aligned. So if you're going to get smarter and provide customer perceived value with each interaction, this is just sums it all up for me, right? If you know your enemy and yourself, you need not fear the results. So if you know who the buyer is, you know who the prospect is, and you know what you have to offer, and those things are aligned, fantastic. If you know yourself, but you don't know the customer, then for every victory gained, you'll also suffer defeat. So it's going to be, I tried 100 times, 20 work, 30 work, but I'm not as effective as I could be across all 100. And if you know neither your prospect or yourself well enough, you just have this unfortunate likelihood of losing to the competition, even if your product is far superior because of the fact that they are far more prepared than you are. So, I like to use sports as an analogy for those of you in the U.S., U.S. football. I'll use U.S. football that, you think about showing up to a passing offense with a running defense. Going to be difficult for you until you can make an adjustment. You can't just stand there and go, well, that's okay. We'll get the next team next week, and we'll make the adjustments. If you watched films ahead of time to prepare against that competitor and you know about them, right, you're more prepared for the battle, and you didn't anticipate the fact that they may show up with a running game and you didn't have a plan B for how that was going to play itself out, then you've set yourself up potentially for not being effective and not winning the game or not winning the deal. So an example of this would be that marketing has qualified a lead. It's come inbound. Maybe they did it with account-based marketing. Maybe they did it with other means, outbound selling activities. They've qualified the lead, and now they pass it over to sales. The mistake they make is that I've qualified the lead, and it might even be scored. But regardless of the score, the sales AE, right, the sales rep, the sales team, the sales manager receives those leads as if they were created equal. So even though you've scored them on the marketing side, sales may be responding to them the same. So a score, A, B, C, D as an example. An A lead, you should, and a B lead and a C lead, one sales rep calls first, one sales rep shows up first, one sales rep sends an email. You don't know which one worked. You don't know which one was more effective. You aren't able to take that intelligence and say, gosh, if we called first with that A lead, we have a higher likelihood of being successful the next time. And so none of that is getting captured. Then marketing goes, I've been passing over all these marketing qualified leads, and sales rep, Bob and sales rep Sally, Bob is able to really knock it out of the park, and Sally's just not being as effective. And it isn't maybe Sally individually. It could be the things that she does when she gets that lead, that she may be sending an email first where Bob is calling first, and it's far more effective with that A. So when I say being smarter, when I say running plays and having a playbook, what I mean by that is don't just hand leads and expect sales to do what sales does. Get much better about giving them a prescriptive roadmap on what to do with that particular lead. And the holy grail of that would be that you learned each time you handed off an A lead or a B lead or a C lead, and over time the intelligence starts to tell the system that when Sally opens that lead, it tells her exactly what to do for that particular lead based on all the intelligence you have for all the other sales reps that got a lead that was scored similar to that. In that case, you can get much more prescriptive about what kinds of leads you may be going after in an account-based marketing campaign, or what you're messaging to, how you funnel them, which ones are handled through automation, which ones are handled through inside reps, which ones are handled through the field. And for those of you who have indirect partners and indirect channels, which ones get passed off to your partners. And the more you know that, and the more you use intelligence and data and analytics to drive the response to the customer insight because of all the things, the digital breadcrumbs, if you will, that they've left along the way, the better off your sales reps will be when they show up to the customer. When marketing gives a lead to a customer, to a sales rep, and the sales rep shows up to a customer. Let's play out the scenario. And I show up. I'm the sales rep. Marketing has given me a qualified lead, and I show up to this customer. I sit across from him. I open up my laptop. I start giving him a demonstration of my tool, right? My software, my cloud-based tool, my whatever it might be. And he sort of leans back in his chair and he goes, really, Tiffani? You're going to show me a demo? I've been using the free version for the last 90 days. I called you to come in and give me a demo. Who looks like they're totally ill-prepared in that situation? The sales rep does. Marketing gave the lead. Marketing doesn't have to sit in front of the customer and have them basically go, I've now checked out. One, you don't know me. We can go back to that, I was just looking for the restroom, right? You don't know me. You didn't prepare for this. Yet, in many ways, the sales rep feels like, well, I did prepare because I got a marketing qualified lead. Marketing handed it to me. The next time marketing hands me that lead for the next person, I may not follow up on it, right? Because I don't want to, in the eyes of the customer, look like I wasn't prepared. So when you think about plays, really think through what is the implication of taking a lead and handing it off generically versus taking a lead and handing it off with highly prescriptive recommendations. And what's the difference in the experience for the customer, whether it's via phone, whether it's via an email, whether it's via a digital touch, whether it's a video call, whether it's inside sales, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you want to show up in front of the customer, whatever show up means, that makes them feel like you know who they are, as much as you can in an individual way. Because obviously I know for the larger companies on the phone, it's difficult to be that personalized. But even if you just pick those accounts you're doing account-based marketing on, or outbound call campaigns where you just pick another segment of the market. So really thinking about that in a much more specific way, and it could just be you grab 3 or 4 reps, try it there with very specific marketing qualified leads, and it might be heavy manual process in the short term till you prove it out, then wrap it into the overall systems and build out the capabilities and what you have that can help you scale it. So why is that important, right? If the teams get more aligned, if you start to build actionable playbooks, I can tell you at the end of the day, the trick there is that sales training doesn't always focus on, how to respond to the marketing efforts, because it's been much more focused on product training or, how to story tell or, sell value, not products, or, how to demo a product depending on what industry you're in, et cetera. So, thinking about training in a new way will really, really start to help. So I'll tell you this, that, coming from a sales background, both, as I said earlier, right, as an individual quota-carrying sales rep to eventually running an entire sales division for a Fortune 500 company, I can tell you that not all training is created equal, nor do people, i.e. sales reps, receive the same level of value from training as everybody else. There are those who take much of what is taught and attempt to apply it to their everyday life, where the vast majority may take just a few nuggets from the entire sales training curriculum and apply where they think it can help them. Either way, training can be a once-a-year effort at a sales kickoff meeting, but that's not the way it should be, right? It must be something which is invested in over time. And it not only needs to be training, that training needs to be followed up with ongoing coaching from sales managers. What's interesting is many talk about sales training for the individual reps, how they can hone their skills to be better storytellers, et cetera. But what they rarely do is talk about training sales managers. And so when you have sales managers that are better coaches and mentors and understand how to manage certain kinds of sellers and make investments in training dollars, which you can see on this slide here, those that invested more than $1,000 for a sales rep are higher performers. And when they are higher performers and when sales skills training exceeds expectations, the percentage of deals won was plus 12% on the swing. And the number was like 42 to 58% or so. But that 12% swing was when sales skills training exceeds expectations. So if you are in charge of selling or training, if you are marketing, that you have to think about the sales manager. It's just unbelievable to me that the frontline sales manager receives so little attention when it comes to this topic. It's obviously a very key role in the sales org, and if not the key role when it comes to improving sales performance at the rep level. And, for all intents and purposes, specifically for this webinar, the sales manager is usually the gatekeeper when marketing wants to gain access to the sales reps and introduce new promotions or call scripts, email templates, et cetera. Yet in this area, it just gets overlooked when we speak about how sales and marketing can work more closely together. Thinking about the connection point between a product marketing manager and the sales manager, and how does that relationship get tighter? I don't know if marketing can get close to every individual rep, but they sure can get closer to the managers that manage those individuals, because sometimes it's 8, 10, 12, 50, 100 reps that they're responsible for. Think of the influence in the coaching sessions and the pipeline reviews if they're really focused on helping them be better about those marketing plays or about what scripts they're using, or are they even using the marketing material. If you get the sales managers as champions for you, it's much easier to get the sales reps to get on board. And it's a great way to get them to lose their perception or overcome the perception or make it better in the relationship and what they think about marketing, and potentially vice versa. For the sales managers on the call, I challenge you to reach out to the marketing managers yourself. If you're going to wait for marketing to come to you, it may never happen depending on the culture of the organization. So don't wait for them to come to you. Go to them. Ask, how can you get more engaged? How can you help? How can you understand? How can you empower your salespeople to be more effective using the marketing materials? So when you think about the future power team, right, between marketing and sales, I think more than anything, sales or service has a marketing channel now. Going back to that image where I said that it was surprising to me that if marketing is going to own full customer experience, yet sales wasn't on the list, service was also light in comparison. And if you think about all the places in which the customer will reach out, the top three in that graph was social media, web, and mobile apps. But when you look down, it was more of the channel that was used versus the role. And so what does service use today? Are they using chat? Are they using video? What is sales using today? A lot more tools on social selling, et cetera. And so when you think about this, I want to start with one big statement, right? The big statement I want to make, it's not who owns what. Ultimately, it's all about how better to serve your customers. Customers need to be the true north in every decision you make that affects them, and also that affects really the health of your business. If you don't put your customers as the true north and you start looking at decisions that you make on the marketing or sales side through the eyes of the customer, so it's great, we've all been doing this for a long time, but I'm sure many of you realize that what got us here is not necessarily going to get us there. So you have to start to think, I may have done this with leads before, or I may have done, to drive demand, I may have done banner ads, I might have done search engine optimization, I may have done call campaigns. We all know they're not as effective as they used to be. And so what is it that the customer wants? You can't solve to everybody, but what are the big segmentation categories that you can do account-based marketing against? Is it size? Is it vertical? Is it industry? Is it geography? Is it product? Is it they're a current customer? Is it an upsell, cross-sell campaign? At the end of the day, it's not who owns it. It's all about how to serve the customer better. So if you keep that as your true north, you may start to make different decisions. There's a great example that Jeff Bezos uses for any of you who read things that are said about him. He's got his sort of 2-pizza rule, right? Can't have a meeting larger than can be fed by a couple of pizzas. But the other thing that he does is in a room, he only has as many chairs as there are people in the meeting. There's no extra chairs except one. And that extra chair is for the customer. So when an executive comes, and pontificates about what they think they should be doing in the business, he deflects to the customer. Great, I'm glad, Mark, you think that's what we should be doing. However, I think we should ask the customer. And if you don't come to the meeting prepared with what the customer thinks about those kinds of things, it's just going to fall flat for him to make big decisions unless they understand what the customer really wants. And the way to do that is you have to establish a customer-centric culture. You have to start from the outside in. You can't solve to everyone, as I keep saying, and I think people get wrapped around the axle of, well, I can't solve to every single lead. I get 1,000 leads a month, or I get 10,000 leads a month, or I get 100 leads a month and I have 2 salespeople. It doesn't matter. Everyone is squeezed for resources if you're doing lead generation well. And so you have to figure out, what are the things I can stop doing so that I can focus more on the customer and do more of what they want me to do, not potentially more of what we've always done. And the way to do this is, how do you redefine relationships, influence and engagement? Redefine relationships between your brand and your customer, your internal customers, between sales and marketing and service. Anybody who has a customer touch is responsible for the experience a customer has with your brand. The influence you have in the market, both as a brand and as an influencer, and the engagement that you have with customers. So redefining relationships is really important. And thinking differently, once again, starting from the outside in and your true north of the customer. I get asked this a lot. Tiffani, that all sounded great, but it sounds to me like you want to avoid sort of the standard, tried and true performance metrics that we've all, grown up with. I think sales managers would not stand up and go, yes, raise my hand, I want more metrics. And I'm sure the sales rep would say, I don't want any more metrics. It's almost like, I don't want to do any more data entry. I think that's not something you'd hear from sales reps. And so it isn't about avoiding performance metrics. It's about the KPIs which foster the right behavior between multiple teams. So keeping the performance metrics you need to get predictability in your business and roll pipelines upstream to make sure that executives feel comfortable and confident where the business is going, but also thinking about different kinds of KPIs that can be shared between sales and marketing. Is it net promoter scores? Is it customer satisfaction scores? Is it churn rates for those of us that are in recurring revenue businesses? What are the things that you can start to align that are customer impact? And how can you make them shared? I think marketing owning quota is not necessarily going to be the way to go because I think that then it starts to get something that is very binary, right? You hit your number, you don't hit your number. If it gets cloudy, it gets more difficult to hold people accountable for making sure the performance is happening. So making sure you keep those good ones that need to run the business. But look forward to those that can be more forward-looking. And then shifting from big data, so everyone's got lots of information, whether it's in an Excel spreadsheet, whether it's in a homegrown system, whether it's in really powerful CRM tools and things like Pardot, or Salesforce, whatever it might be, you have to move from big data to more intelligence, as we talked about, right, being smarter about it, but more importantly, being much more predictive on which plays to run with which customers. Use the data in context. They're an existing customer. Don't show up like you don't know who they are. Remember, you got to show up in the context. They've used your product in the past, a past job, another company. They've been demoing your product over time. Then you don't walk in and say, let me tell you about my company, or you're upselling or cross-selling them, yet they're not even using what you've already sold them. How do you get them to use what you sold them before you start trying to upsell and cross-sell them? So really thinking about moving from big data to intelligence to predictive selling, right? And intelligence and analytics is absolutely the way the market is going, especially if you're trying to align the sales and marketing organizations. And then moving from segmentation-driven marketing to intimate sales engagement, right? These big, broad segments like anyone is my customer or SMB is my customer or mid-market is my customer is not a segment. You've got to get smarter about what makes the right customer for your product, and then, how do you own the largest percentage of that total addressable market that you can in the segment where you can win. As you start to win more and more and more, then you maybe potentially think about expanding outwardly. But if you're just going to say, I'm going to go for anything and anybody, I think you have less ability to have that intimate sales engagement, which customers are now looking for. So with that, I'm going to sort of give you your Monday morning homework, right? Participate in each other's business beyond status reports. That's sort of an overarching theme, right? Participate in each other's business beyond status reports. Make the customer your true north. Always look through the lens of the outside in alongside inside out to make the KPIs or key performance indicators more effective, right? So the first thing I'd say is agree on shared marketing and sales goal. Pick one or two, start there. Just start there. Don't try and boil the ocean. Pick one or two that you think can be manageable. Get a marketing manager, product marketing manager, get a sales manager together, start with a small group, and see what you can do better and learn from. The second thing is sales. Pick the top campaigns you feel have potential. Work with marketing to improve that customer engagement there, right? So just pick one or two. Give feedback on what has happened in front of a customer with that campaign, or if they called in, they didn't understand it, or you showed up and they were confused, or they thought that it wasn't very clear. Give that feedback in a constructive way. It isn't, it was bad. It's how do we make it better? How do we make the experience better for our customers jointly? The third one, for any of you who have followed me over time, this is one is near and dear to my heart, which is marketing. I really want you to go on a few customer calls and do it frequently. But what I want you to do is not show up and say, I'm the product marketing manager, and I'm here just listening in on sales calls, because the customer will not give you a real sales experience. Go in and say, I'm new to sales. I'm shadowing him. I'm on my onboarding. It's my first 30 days. I'm a new sales rep. And hear what it's like to be a sales rep. You may be surprised when you've worked weeks or months on your beautiful PowerPoint presentation that the customer doesn't want to see it. Or you can see them completely turn off to seeing a PowerPoint or a demo. Or, you ask about the white paper and he didn't read it. Or whatever it might be. I think you get a very different reality than you get from a survey when you're sitting in front of a customer. More importantly, if your sales rep gets kicked out of a meeting because they just were ill-prepared, getting kicked out of a meeting is a freeing experience. I've been kicked out many a time, and I can tell you that you walk out of there going, wow, I don't ever want that to happen again. What can I do to make sure it doesn't? And you either show up better prepared, you bring a sales engineer with you, you don't do a demo, or you have a backup plan, whatever it might be, you will learn from those mistakes. So it would be these three, right? Agree on shared marketing and sales goals. Pick up the top two campaigns you feel have potential. Work with marketing. Marketing, go on a few sales calls, and then the overarching umbrella of sort of putting customers at the true north, and also making sure that you understand that without this connection between marketing and potentially starting with the sales managers, we will just keep chasing all the possibility that technology will bring us, because the unintended consequence of all this technology advancement is the fact that the customer has become far more disruptive to our sales processes than anything else I've seen in the 20 years I've been selling technology specifically, for sure. So with that, I think we are going to open it up for some questions. But, before I end, I just want to say, remember, this is a love letter, right? I was a little slanted towards sales, probably a little harder on marketing, but sales is grinding every day, right, to go get that quota, go sell that business so that we can keep funding marketing budgets and marketing campaigns and keep the business moving forward. So, I see a time, I hope I see a time where sales and marketing comes together, and this is no longer a topic. It's sort of like, yep, we've done that, we've nailed it, and we've done things that have gotten us there. So, take everything I've given you with just hopefully there's a few nuggets from there that you can take back on Monday morning and maybe take, on the sales side, take your marketers to lunch. On the marketing side, take your sales managers to lunch. Start to get closer to them personally and, let the relationship blossom so that the customer has a fantastic experience with your brand. So with that, I think we've got some questions. I've been trying to answer them as I've been going. So I think I did the KPI as key performance indicator. And one question is, what do you recommend marketing does to prepare better sales, especially in an extremely siloed organization? It's a great question, right? And this goes back to why it's so important to get the two groups together. If you can better prepare sales, we almost need to back up and go, what can we do to better prepare marketing to make sure they're delivering what is needed to sales? And if it's siloed, is it siloed by product, by geo, by industry, by vertical? What is it siloed around? And then making sure you align marketing people in the short term, right, to those quote-unquote silos, using your words, right, to those silos, so that you at least get it closer to bring back overall. And you may find that there's some commonality amongst the silos that give you some ground which you can build upon. But the only way to break down that silo, unfortunately, is that's a cultural thing. It has to start all the way at the top, and we're not going to solve that on this webinar. But if you can do it from the grassroots up, right, from the ground up, with a sales manager and a marketing manager and breaking down that siloed organization and doing it one at a time, I think you will have much better results than you have today. And if you prove it in one silo and how you were able to break it down, I think you will get the support to do it in other places. Another question is, in my opinion, should the personalized email be sent from marketing or from a salesperson in order to get higher engagement? Great question. I think there's a lot of bias in the market, and I don't have any research to point to on this, but is there a bias that when you get a note from a salesperson that people tend to not listen to them? And is there a bias that if you get a marketing message that they think it's nothing real? I think there's a bias on both sides. And so I'm a firm believer in A/B testing, right? Test from marketing, test from sales, test with certain offers and products, test with certain openings and closings and calls to action. And once again, going back to get smarter, use the data, then get much more intelligent, and then get much more prescriptive. So I'd say my opinion would be depends on the customer, depends on the product, depends on the offer, and that's not an answer, right? You're going to have to test and find your way through it. The last one I've got time for is my sort of definition of account-based marketing and how does marketing automation need to perform to facilitate it. The more you can automate some of the heavy tasks from sales, the better off you can scale it. But losing personalization because of that is always a risk. So you've got to balance between going after certain sets of customers with a particular message, and then if you can scale it and test it, and then learn from it and have the intelligence, then create that account-based marketing, taking out some of the more mundane tasks away from either sales or marketing, and automating that in a way that doesn't impact customer experience, I'm all for it. So with that, we are out of time. I so appreciate you guys showing up. This was my first Salesforce webinar, and I appreciate Pardot asking me to do this for you guys. I hope you enjoy it, and the slides will be made available, and the replay will come out, and share it with people in your team. And once again, thanks for joining us today on the webinar.